In this video, we're going to discuss polarity rules. Polarity rules are oftentimes made a lot more complicated than they really need to be, as we really only need to remember one simple equation to answer all polarity rule questions. An important concept to understand when discussing polarity rules is how voltage will show up on the EEG. So when voltage is positive, we expect a downward deflection. When voltage is negative, we have an upward deflection. In order to solve any polarity problem, we really only need to know one simple equation. That is, electrode 1 subtract electrode 2 is equal to the total voltage. Well, and as we described before, if the total voltage is positive, we have a downward deflection, and if the total voltage is negative, we have an upward deflection. So let's go to the whiteboard and work out some practice problems. So if input 1 is equal to positive 40 microvolts and input 2 is equal to positive 20 microvolts, the waveform will be what? So we'll work this first practice problem out together. Remember, the equation is as simple as electrode 1 subtract electrode 2 is equal to the total voltage. And if voltage is positive, then we have a downward deflection. And if voltage is negative, we have an upward deflection. Okay? All right, so electrode 1 subtract electrode 2. Here we have 40 subtract 20 is equal to positive 20, which, remember, if voltage is positive, then we get a downward deflection on the EEG. If input 1 is negative 40 microvolts and input 2 is negative 20 microvolts, the waveform will be blank. So go ahead, pause the video, try and work this one out on your own. And when you unpause, we'll work it out together. So if input 1 is negative 40 and input 2 is negative 20, then this is going to equal negative 40 subtract negative 20 is going to equal negative 20 microvolts. So we know that if the total voltage is negative, we are going to have an upward deflection on the EEG. So if input 1 is equal to positive 40 microvolts and input 2 is equal to negative 20 microvolts, the waveform will be blank. Again, go ahead and pause the video and try and work this one out on your own. So electrode 1 minus electrode 2, we get 40 microvolts subtract negative 20 microvolts is equal to positive 60 microvolts. So if voltage is positive, then we know that we will have a downward deflection. All right, let's try one last one. So this one says the deflection will be upward if blank. So we know that in order for a deflection to be upward, that voltage must be negative, right? So here we're looking for a total voltage that is negative. All right, so let's start with option A. We have electrode 1 subtract electrode 2. So we have 20 microvolts subtract negative 20 microvolts, which if you throw that into a calculator is going to give you a positive 40 microvolts. And we know that if voltage is positive, then we will have a downward deflection. So we know that it can't be A. All right. So now let's try option B. So we have 120 subtract 50, which is going to give us a positive 70 microvolts, which again, if voltage is positive, then we have a downward deflection. So we can get rid of B. We'll move on to C. If we have negative 40 microvolts and we subtract negative 20 microvolts, that will leave us with a negative 20 microvolt voltage. So we know that if voltage is negative, that will give us a positive deflection. So we can assume that C is correct. And just for some extra practice, we can go ahead and do D. So we know that if we have a negative 50 microvolt discharge and we subtract negative 50, that is going to give us 0 total voltage. So what happens when we have 0 total voltage? Well, that just means that there will be no deflection and the EEG will be flat. And that'll do it for polarity calculations. Hopefully that clears up any questions you might have about solving those. Oftentimes, polarity questions are made to be a lot harder than they actually are. There are a few different ways to learn how to do these problems, but in my opinion, just understanding the basic equation that electrode 1 minus electrode 2 equals the total voltage, and then understanding that if the voltage is positive, you have a downward deflection, and if the voltage is negative, you have an upward deflection, is the easiest way to remember it. It's super easy on test day. They give you a whiteboard and a marker to just work these out. And I think with this knowledge, you should be able to solve any question they ask.